That's awesome. Thanks, Connie. Never ceases to inspire, does she?
Yeah.
It's incredible. So our next gentleman is going to speak for us today. It's kind of the same way. He inspires. And he does it just from who he is. Because he always comes from the heart. And you know he's always sincere. And he's our very own John Wangsgaard.
No, that's okay. Well, I have a lot of ground to cover today, and this is an incredibly complex subject with many different tenets. A person could spend years studying this matter. I first want to tell you I was really struck by a song that we sang about the power of love and how divinity permeates all. Yesterday I posted on Facebook a story about a man who was a beekeeper. He'd raised bees his whole life. He dedicated his life to the care of bees. And at his death, when they got to the place where they were going to intern his body, there was a canopy there. And the entire canopy was covered with bees. Now, I'm a trained scientist. I have a master's degree in synthetic organic chemistry, and I currently work at the University of Utah as a chemist. And I'm not one that, just goes willy-nilly on different concepts or precepts, but if you study anything at all about quantum mechanics, a couple of particles and so forth, it becomes really clear that there is a divine intelligence that permeates all. I've been told that before one ever gives a talk, one should tell a story. And so, since I couldn't remember which one I told last time, I was going to tell you about a Muslim, a Hindu, and an attorney were out for a country drive. They'd been to a conference, and they decided to take a scenic route back. And as fate would have it, it was getting towards evening, and their car broke down. They didn't have any cell phone coverage, and they could see off in the distance a farmhouse. And so they hiked over there, knocked on the door, and explained the situation, and asked the farmer if he could put them up for the night until they could call a tow truck in the morning. He said, "No problem, but I only have room for 2 of you in the house. One of you have to spend the night in the barn." So the Muslim says, "Okay, I will go." And he's gone about 5 minutes as the knock at the door. He says, "I'm sorry, but it is against my religion to sleep in the same place where an unclean pig sleeps." So the Hindu goes, "Okay, I will go." And he's gone about 5 minutes. Knock at the door. He says, "I'm sorry, I cannot sleep in the same place where a cow sleeps." So the attorney goes, "Okay, I guess I'll have to go." And he's gone about 5 minutes, and there's a knock on the door, and the cow and the pig are standing there. So if any of your attorneys or have attorneys, I have 2 nephews that are attorneys and a cousin and so forth. That's just a joke. Okay, so in 1894, a Russian, and it depends on which biography you read, but some claim he was a doctor, others a journalist and so forth, but his name was Nicholas Notovich, was traveling. He explored extensively in Afghanistan, India, Nepal, and Tibet. He was traveling over the pass of Bolan, over the Punjab down to the arid rocky land of Ladakh, and into the majestic vale of Kashmir of the Himalayas. On his journey to visiting Leh, the capital of Ladakh, where Buddhist convent Himas is located, he had an accident where he was thrown from his horse and he broke his leg. So he was transported to this Buddhist monastery at Himas, and over time, as he was recuperating, one of the monks sort of took an interest in him. He was a Russian Jew who had converted to Christianity, and told him about that there was some records about a great saint named Isa, who had spent time there in their convent or monastery, as well as many others, and would he like to read these texts to you? And he was struck as he learned about these texts, about the incredible similarities that existed between the life of who we call Jesus, and Saint Isa. So after 7 years, when he returned to the Western world, he actually printed a book, which was created an immediate firestorm. As you can imagine, that if traditional Christianity, if they're told that Jesus had actually spent time in India, in actually Persia, India, Nepal, and in a Buddhist monastery, and where he had learned great truths from the Rig Vedas, the ancient Hindu scripts, those kind of things. There was an immediate firestorm. And so some people were saying that he had made this whole thing up. They claimed that he actually later confessed that he had made the whole thing up. And if that were the case, and then that would be the end of it. But a Hindu Swami named Abhinananda actually traveled to the same monastery at Himas to either confirm or deny his book and his reports, and he actually saw the same manuscripts, this 200-page volume of the life of Saint Isa, and he wrote a similar book saying, yeah, this is true, that Jesus did travel here. He did study in this Buddhist monastery, and these examples exist. And if that wasn't enough, then another Russian, who was a very well-known Russian scientist named Nicholas Roerich, also did the same thing. He traveled to Himas and found the same scriptures, or the same, whatever you wish to call them, the same accounts of the life of Saint Isa. And one of the things that he writes that I think is actually, to me, it really speaks about the legitimacy, because it rings true. This sounds so much like Jesus, my version of Jesus. He passed his time in 7 ancient cities of India, such as Benares, which is where they cremate. It's located along the Ganga River, where they cremate many of the people that pass there. It's the holiest city in India. All loved him because Isa dwelt in peace with Vaishyas and Sudras. These are the 2 lower castes of the Hindus, the untouchables, whom he instructed and helped. But the Brahmins and Kshatriyas told him that Brahman forbade those to approach those who were created out of his womb and feet. The Vaishyas were allowed to listen to the Vedas only on holidays, and the Sudras were forbidden not only to be present at the reading of the Vedas, but could not even look at them. That's the untouchables. Now, isn't that interesting? That it seems that it's a principal tenet of humanity when we're ruled by our ego. Any religion is ruled by the ego, that those that are in the privileged position, the high priests, whatever, be it Sadducees or Pharisees or the Brahmins, they want to keep control over who can study the scriptures, who can learn, and it's got to come through us. That's why we're here, that's why you pay tithes and so forth. Jesus was always clearly opposed to that. So Isa said that man had filled the temples with his abominations. In order to pay homage to metals and stones, man sacrificed his fellows, in whom dwells a spark of the Supreme Spirit. Man demeans those who labor by the sweat of their brow in order to gain goodwill of the sluggard who sits at the lavishly set board. But they who deprive their brothers of the common blessing shall be themselves stripped of it. Vaishyas and Sudras were struck with astonishment and asked if they could perform. Isa bade them, worship not the idols, do not consider yourself first, do not humiliate your neighbor, help the poor, sustain the feeble, do evil to no one. Do not covet that which you do not possess and which is possessed by others. Many, learning such words, decided to kill Isa, but Isa, forewarned, departed from the place by night. Afterwards, Isa went into Nepal, into the Himalayas. Well, perform for us miracles, demanded the servitors of the temple, but Isa replied, isn't that, again, you see the same thing when he was brought before the court of Herod. Isa replied to them, miracles made their appearance from the very day when the world was created. He who cannot behold them is deprived of the greatest gift of life. But woe unto you, enemies of man, woe unto you if you wait that which should attest its power by miracle. Isa taught that man should not strive to behold the eternal spirit with one's own eyes, but to fill it with the heart, and to become a pure and worthy soul. Not only shall we take human offerings, but must not slaughter animals, because all is given for the use of man. Do not steal the goods of others, because that would be usurpation from the dear one. Do not cheat. Again, the same kind of principles that we found in the Old Testament from Moses. Beware ye who divert men from the true path, and who fill the people with superstitions and prejudices, who blind the vision of the seen ones, and who preach subservience to material things. So I could go on and on. To me, it sounds very much similar to the Jesus of the New Testament. One of the things that has always struck me, I was, as I told you last time, I was a follower of a great holy man named Sathya Sai Baba, and he talked extensively in his speeches about not only about Jesus traveling to India and later into the Himalayas, but also another great, there's been several other great swamis who have access to what's known as the Akashic record, which is this place in the ether where everything that ever happens is recorded. And Yogananda, I have a book here where Yogananda also acknowledges that Jesus spent time there. And a good parallel is what I'm wearing now. These are called malas. The Hindus and the Buddhists have those. And also, a slightly different version, the Muslims have what they call prayer beads. Well, doesn't this look a little bit like maybe a rosary? Have you ever stopped to think, well, where did the rosary come from? I think that there's a parallel there. I think that that's something, the concept they bought. When you're meditating and you're repeating the name of God, which is one of the principal things that is taught in Hinduism as a way to gain favor or gain knowledge of God, you use each bead as you repeat the name. Another thing that is of kind of similarity or that I found is Sai Baba manifested vibhuti. It's this holy ash. It represents the impermanence of all things material, that everything is eventually reduced to ash or carbon. And the Hindus, they wear it routinely on their forehead. And since we just went through Easter, we went through a place where it's called Ash Wednesday. And I thought, again, there was an interesting parallel there. That where did Ash Wednesday come from? Where they wear ash on their forehead. And the Hindus, they do that all the time. Particularly those that are followers of Shiva, but also of Vishnu and so forth, they'll have an ash paste on their forehead. And that's how you can tell what followers they are. This stuff here actually was given to me by the hand of Sai Baba. I'd like to pass it around if you want to taste it. Put some on your forehead, please feel free. You can just lick a finger and stick it inside. Sai Baba, when I was with the group yesterday at A Course in Miracles at Anna's restaurant, they were talking about how there's a place, and there's several places where Sai Baba is venerated, and there's one picture of his. They have, every morning they go in there and they scrape off the vibhuti because it forms on there every night to a great thickness. There was another woman who was a nurse who took care of in Oregon that I had the privilege of going to her house. She had a robe of his, and the vibhuti would just form on that routinely. And she also had a picture. Somebody actually, she brought in this housekeeper, and the woman tried to clean it off because she thought this was just really poor housekeeping. I had some friends I used to accuse them of it because they had a picture that they had formed on as well. I'm going to change. If you're interested in this subject at all, there's this book here, Jesus Lived in India. I highly recommend. It is a great detailed study of all the evidence supports not only that Jesus went to India, but the time he spent there, and physical evidence that exists as well. Now, some of the stuff is very controversial, and I'm not going to touch on that. I feel like I'm walking on ice as it is, but well, one of the subjects that I'd like to address is that, at the time of Jesus, the Jews, they firmly believed in reincarnation, and there's actually references in the Bible itself that can only be explained by the concept of reincarnation. The Jews at the time of Christ held the great general belief of the transmigration of the soul. The Talmudists assumed that God had created just a finite number of Jewish souls which would return as long as there were Jews, and occasionally punitive reincarnation in animal form. Then later on, at another point, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do they say that I am, the Son of Man? Who do they say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist," which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, since they were alive at the same time. But how could some Elias, which is another name for Elijah, Jeremias, or one of the prophets? He said unto them, "But whom say ye that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "Thou art the Christ." And the disciples asked Jesus, "Why would you say that the scribes of Elias must come first?" And Jesus answered and said unto them, "Elias truly should come first and restore all things. But I say unto you that Elias has already come, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatever they listed, likewise how the Son of Man suffer for them, of them." Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. So Jesus actually believed that John the Baptist was the incarnation of Elijah, and that he'd come to help fulfill the prophecies in order to baptize Jesus. Again, that's a subject that I can give a long talk with, but in 1945, a Egyptian shepherd was looking for fertilizer to help raise some crops, and he came across a large earthen jar full of a bunch of manuscripts, somewhat similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls. These were found in Egypt near a village called Nag Hammadi, which they're now referred to as the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. The one book there that I find most fascinating, because I believe it so most represents the actual words and teachings of Jesus, is called the Gospel of Thomas. And there's a whole lot of sayings here, but I'm just going to read some of the few and see if they don't resonate with you like they do with me. And he said, "Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death." Jesus said, "Let one who seeks not stop seeking until one finds. When one finds, one will be troubled. When one is troubled, one will marvel and will reign over all." Jesus said, "If your leaders say to you, 'Look, the kingdom is in heaven,' then the birds of heaven will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside you and is outside you." When I had one privilege of being with Satya Sai Baba during a personal interview, someone asked him, he asked, "Well, why have you come?" And people said, "To find God." And so then he said, "Well, where is God?" And the answer, of course, is God is everywhere. And he said, "Think of a fish. A fish swims in water, contains water. That water is God." And so we are all fish swimming in a sea of God. One of the things I wanted to mention is that part of that divine intelligence that permeates all, the physicists have created or postulated a particle known as a gluon that helps hold everything together. And I submit that gluon is actually the principle, the God principle. Jesus said, "The person old in days will not hesitate to ask a little child 7 days old about the place of life, and that person will live. For many of the first will be last." And I was saying, basically, you need to become as a child in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus said, "Know what is in front of your face, what is hidden from you will be disclosed unto you. For there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed." Look, the sower went out, took a handful of seeds, and scattered them. Some fell on the road, and the birds came and pecked them up. Others fell on rock, and they did not take root in the soil, did not produce heads of grain. Others fell on thorns, and they choked the seeds, and worms devoured them. And others fell on good soil, and brought forth a good crop. It yielded 60 per measure, and 120 per measure. Jesus said, "I have thrown fire upon the world, and look what I am watching it until it blazes. This heaven will pass away, and the one above it will pass away. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die. During the days when you are what is dead, you make it alive. When you are in the light, what will you do? There's a whole series of I think the scriptures are sayings that really resonate true to me, and I'm not going to bore you with all of them. But if you wish to learn more about the Gospel of Thomas, I highly encourage you to get a copy of the book. Again, I could go on for quite a while, but I think I've used up my time, so I want to thank you all for this great privilege. It's been wonderful having my friends here and companions, and all of you. I love you so much. Thank you.